let me rephrase your question to see if I understand it correctly. Is your question that as a practitioner, perhaps a monk or a nun, do you reach a point in your practice when gender becomes not important?
Very thin,
Yeah.
the sense of identification.
For people around us or for ourselves?
No, for yourself.
For ourselves.
I remember one of the things that really inspired me about being a monastic was the potential to not get so caught up in my gender. I remember reading a book called The Cloister Walk. This was back in high school. And this was a lay woman in Catholic. So as Reverend Sure mentioned about Catholicism. So she was actually visiting Catholic monasteries. And she said she remembered going with one of her friends, who was actually much more attractive than her, talking to a monk. And she said this was the first time in her entire life she had the experience where that monk actually paid equal attention to her and her friend. Because always in all the other interactions, her friend got almost all the attention because she was very much more attractive than her.
What I'm saying is kind of the sense of female or attractiveness or unattractiveness of a female and male, it's kind of blur, and then you see everything like being
equanimity. I don't know if there's a blur, but there's a blur. Everybody's blur about out.
No, literally.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And so the reason I was partly inspired because I think, especially being a young person, a young man, we can see how trapped we are in our perceptions of the world through that energy. And that kind of, it was one of the quickest ways to objectify somebody else and then narrow your experience in this very small space, and at that time I could feel how trapping that was. And so and I think this is actually not just limited to monastic, it's actually something lay people, if you're serious about practice, this is something why we actually come to the monastery and we have gender segregation is because of that. It's not because we're trying to say it's dirty or it's negative and want to push it away. It's because we're trying to open a space where you actually can go deeper into your being, where you can actually get past all the identities around gender, around who I am and what I'm doing, and get to these what Life Fox was saying about who am I really beyond all those things. Now, as a monk, you'll probably see we don't actually as casually talk to females like we usually have another man with us, is because also the Buddha was very realistic that as human beings, there's ways that people can get tripped up. And especially in the spiritual life, if you look at the West, in America, there's actually been scandal after scandal after scandal. The reason is because as you start practicing this spiritual life, you can actually get into very intimate relationships very quickly with people as people ask questions. And it kind of spirals into something that's not, that gets into trouble. And so the monastic life, essentially, the Buddha creates a whole way of being where people can interact, but not in a way that you get all tied up together. And so is this something that we transcend? I mean, I think we're all working at it at our different levels, and it has its different kind of ups and downs, but it's something we're working on. And it's not something that is seen as I said, really evil or something. It's actually raw energy that we transform in our practice. So that's, to me, was actually a very useful insight, is that it's not something evil, it's not something bad, it's something that you actually have to work as your fundamental energy to transform. And in the yogic traditions of India, in the Taoist traditions of China, they talk about it, and Buddhism talks about it as well. So
it helps us, having that helps us. Sometimes people come to us and say, I feel like I'm like this, or I feel like that. Say if you're a male, I feel more affection for females or males, or a female feeling more affection for one or the other. To us, it doesn't really matter much because it's a question of desire. I mean, on the surface, it comes out in many different forms, but it helps us go deeper into the more fundamental underlying, rather than just where people get caught up is the outside.
Yeah, maybe to be very precise, actually in the Buddhist tradition, we actually say when a person is able to end or transcend their sexual desire, they actually become an arhat.
Well, that could be
that's actually you could say almost like a definition of an arhat, is they're actually free of sexual desire and they don't have to come back into samsaric existence. So an arhat is an extremely accomplished spiritual being in the Buddhist tradition.
I deal with a lot of patients. Eventually, they're going to lose their life to the bout of the cancer. So some of you may know a service called a hospice.
Yes.
So when a terminal illness, doesn't matter it's a cancer or some other conditions, when the current medical science cannot solve their problem, we don't want them to come to the hospital or clinic anymore. They would rather want to stay at home with their loved ones or animals, pets, and then spend the last part of the time of this journey. I often find it is very difficult for me to say that goodbye to my patients, because normally when I say that goodbye, it's the last time I hear about that patient until I receive their death certificate and I sign my signature on it. So it's not a very pleasant experience when I say goodbye to some of the patients. Especially some of the patients are very young. I lost a few 20-some-year-old and 40-some-year-old this year. So very difficult. Of course, you cannot really instill your, my basic understanding of Buddhism's literature on dying and rebirth and sort of things. I do sometimes ask those patients, do you believe in the next life? And some of them, don't give me an answer. Some of them say, yes, I'm going to be in heaven with God. So I don't know as a Buddhist how I incorporate my understanding of life and death in those discussions. Like the last discussion, the last one, often makes me and my patients somewhat sad, because some of the patients I developed really long relationship with them. So years of a relationship. Not like dying, they're on the deathbed, their final hours of their life. There's different situation.
Yeah.
As I was hearing what your remarks, I recall a story about Ramaheng Shua. Apparently, Ramaheng Shua wanted to be a doctor once. Yeah, and then Shifu told him, he said, yeah, you could. I can't imitate Shifu because I don't know how Shifu sounds like. But yeah, that's the tips. Yeah, I only met Shifu once, but apparently Shifu told him, he said, yeah, you could do that, but if you are a doctor of the Dharma, then you could something like you have to ask Ramaheng Shua, but something like then you could really help them, or you could point them in the right way, I guess. And I was thinking about my own father who passed away. When he was sick, I was around him, but I couldn't do anything. I mean, yeah, I could make him feel better. Even if I was the best doctor in the world, even if I could have cured him of his sickness, it was only going to be temporary. So, and then my next thought was actually Earth Star Bodhisattva. Before she became Earth Star Bodhisattva, she was a daughter, and her mother died. And she felt, she really wanted to know what happened to her mom, because she knew that her mom wasn't a very decent person when she was alive, and she was afraid for her mom. And when she could, basically she was able to transfer merit, and it made a big difference. And her heart was able to be put at peace. And what I liked about Earth Star Bodhisattva is that at that moment, her body resolve came out, when she realized she could actually help her mom after the physical world ends, after this world that we know ends. What is this world? This world is, you make a phone call to someone you care about and you get angry and you slam your phone. You better hope you have a chance to apologize and make things right before something happens. That's this physical world, right? So in her case, when she made that difference, her heart opened up. She took that step into the Mahayana, and she made a vow. She says, I want to save all mothers. And it's that vow that determination that allowed her to carry out the practice until she became Earth Star Bodhisattva. So I guess I can't speak for you, but if I was a doctor and I was seeing people that I was trying my best to save, I would realize that it doesn't end there. There's more. This is just the physical. I mean, this is just one life. There's more. How can I say, if I really want to be a bodhisattva, if I could be like Earth's bodhisattva, how can I plant a positive affinity with these patients of mine, so that perhaps in the next life when I have true wisdom, I can like really put them on the path so that they can save themselves, because that's the only way living beings can be saved. It's difficult to save living beings, they say. Why? Because you cannot tell someone what to do. You can only make yourself an example until you inspire someone to do the same. Kuan Yin Bodhisattva can do miracles to save you from any physical threat, but she cannot prevent your next thought of anger, your next thought of desire, your next false thought. She's powerless because that's you. So real help is to point someone in the right direction through your own practice, through your own manifestation of what you believe in, so that they look at you and say, yeah, I want to be like that. Yeah, so maybe that, or you could do pi ways for them as well in the short term. Pi ways, develop your practice for them. You know that they're going to die eventually for thereafter. Yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do. Transference of merit, pi ways.
Well, I just wanted to share. I think just as my first thought when I was listening to you talk about, and you're saying these people are moving to hospice, is that as a doctor, I think doctors actually give a lot of courage when they're professional and they know what they're talking about. So for instance, I can see if you really say, hospice is a really good way to get a peaceful passing, kind of being well taken care of. So like, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Ukiah hospice community, if you've talked with them at all, but to kind of inspire confidence in them that you're well taken care of by this group of people in the next phase, that kind of gives them a place where they can move forward with confidence. And I think with the Dharma, there's a sense that actually we want to use, quote unquote, we call it skillful means or expedient wisdom. And so usually for me, that requires a lot of listening first. So like, what's their actual way that they see the world? So if they're Native American, to be able to understand what that means, that you can inspire courage from within that reality that they have. Or if they're Christians, what's the language that we would use to inspire confidence and care in that world? If they're Buddhist, you have to be very careful because there's lots of different kind of Buddhists. As you just said, they might think of karma one way. Most of the Westerners in America don't have any idea about Pure Lands. You tell them, Amitabha Buddha, they go, what? Right? And so you have to be sure you get the right context. Just like the doctor, you're a doctor. It's like giving the right medicine, right? If they have like some type of problem with their leg, and then you give them some other problem, like for cancer.
You get a different doctor, like you send a dentist to.
Yeah, for a cancer patient, right? And so you have to first figure out, okay, so who is this person and how can I communicate with them? And that's a lot what Jin He was saying about the being, quote unquote, Dharma doctors, is the Dharma is like medicine. And you could say, quote unquote, the patients is all the living beings, different ways of seeing the world, what their afflictions are, and then how would the Dharma respond to that skillfully. And so you have, I think, an opportunity there with a lot of patients to be able to, I think my sense about it is probably usually a lot of fear. And knowing that somebody like yourself, my doctor, cares about me, is turning me over to good hands, that to me will at least settle my mind. And then from that affinity, what Jin He said, they might have questions. Why are you so caring? What do you believe? Then from that place you can explore something.
Yeah. That's what I meant by manifestation. You have our sutra request. Dharma is only spoken upon request. The moment you try to, even with the best of intentions, you try to teach, that's not Dharma anymore, because it's not being asked for. The Buddha could do it because he was speaking to conditions. And the Buddha was always asked first. If the Buddha wasn't asked, he wouldn't. He only spontaneously spoke the Amitabha Sutra, and in the Shurangama Sutra, he spontaneously spoke the 50 skandha states. I believe those are the only two parts the Buddha actually spoke without request. everything else, something happened for the Buddha. There's a reason for a request for the Buddha to speak. So then your challenge is, how do you embody all the teachings of the Dharma in such a way that you move your patients so much, like what Jin Chuan say, they ask you, and that creates the opening for something that they can bring in. If not, like you say, you get a formal complaint, right? You're lucky you probably only have one. No. Because what happens is you might turn someone away from the Dharma. Yeah, because we don't, unless you can see into their causes and conditions. Buddhists are supposed to be the only religion that doesn't go out and convert. Yeah, don't be the first one. I'm just kidding. That's why, like Buddha Root Farm, that's why BBM, Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, that's why retreats like this at Sudana Center are really important. Why? Because of community. Through community, it happens naturally, because a retreat like this brings out the best in people. So when a newcomer comes, they feel it's not it's a teaching through unspoken words. People just feel happy, and then you see if the affinities develop. Yeah, if it doesn't develop, it's fine. Yeah, you can't say, hey, you had a good time, you have to come back next year.
Yeah.
I think people will forget what you say, but they never forget kindness or compassion. There's no religion, there's no bounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is on the board, and I don't know really if we have enough time for it, but it was just the question around like socially engaged Buddhism, and just like understanding just what's going on in the world right now. Like, what is the place of Buddhism as it intersects with social justice? I mean, I think you were already touching on this at first, like showing an example in your own life and how that like resonates beyond you. Like I've heard, if how much good can you do if you have not like resolved your own suffering, for instance, and how can you like address other people's suffering? But if you could just speak on like what the Dharma has to say regarding
Social justice.
Yeah, so like kind of doing more than just like internal transformation, but like
She's had a question from day one.
Yeah, I remember.
Different forms, but it's the same question.
It's an important question. I think grew up in the Bay Area, we're really encouraged to think about wider society. You want me to take it? Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually also came partly into the Dharma that way too, because clearly being exposed to modern issues, like at that time, consumerism, globalism, materialism, they weren't even as strong as they were now, like 18 years later, And so I remember seeing all those things and going, wow, that the way that society has structured existence is actually really harmful. And just even my existence living in the Bay Area as a normal person actually creates a lot of harm and suffering for all over the world. I remember a documentary where they showed birds, and in their actual stomach, when they die and they cut open their stomach, they have pieces of plastic, like of our plastic bottles, in their stomach, like a whole bunch of them, because they see these kind of bright things in the ocean. They eat them, and they swallow them, and it becomes part of what they are and who they are. Because not who they are, but it's in their physical body. And like, wow, the actions that I take have effects and ripple effects into society and the world around. That's really, really pretty painful. And so I think it's actually pretty essential for Buddhists, especially us in the, you could say, quote unquote, Mahayana tradition that makes vows to help living beings, to actually engage the world in the appropriate ways. And I think in this organization, there's a six guidelines, but in this organization, you could say the ministry, I'm not sure somebody uses the ministry of this organization is through education oftentimes. And my reflections on that is that it actually tries to go to the root of the problems. Because trying to, and it's still important to do, like people are trying to fight for policy changes, working at the government level, those are all really good things to do. The tricky thing is that if the person who's there making those policies has a really greedy and confused mind, then pretty much every step of the way you have to fight with them. Because the moment you set something up here, they're looking for the loophole around it. and then you have to set something up there, and then they're looking for some other way around it. And so the fundamental issue is their actual greedy mind that's actually creating a lot of suffering for themselves and all these other people. So if you could have caught them when they were 10 years old, like here where we have this Buddha root farm, you know, these young boys are learning about gift economy. You know, they learned about gift economy when they were 10, they're like, oh, and then they grow up and they become, you know, successful people in the world, but their way of seeing what it means to be successful and how I'm contributing to the world is very different. And it's not, you could say, as, not say glamorous, in the sense that you're out on, you know, newspapers or things, but you're working at the kind of root level of these children, helping them become good people. So I think at least in this organization, a lot of the emphasis is actually on developing virtuous education that teaches young people how to be good people. And then there's encouragement to be aware of what's going on in the world. So that's why we have a university, to a large extent, is to be able to engage the world, but a little bit engage the world on our own terms. So we're bringing people into, because the university is really, in some sense, in modern society, where new thought is created. Where America, the world often goes to for where their authority is to the universities, the professors. And so if we have actually an institution that's actually looking at these principles and bringing Buddhist principles through a university structure, then it actually puts those ideas into the thought ways of the leadership. So that's another way that we're trying to, you could say, engage society. So, but each of us pick a different path.
But you can, at the same time, you can be involved in wherever you are involved in. Just let the Noble Eightfold Path be your guiding principle of what will bring you back, of what skillful and unskillful ways of doing things. Let the precepts guide you. At CDTB, we have a variation of it's not a variation of precepts, we have what we call the 6 guidelines. If what you do does not involve like fighting, meaning it doesn't make other people afflicted. So you're actually helping people instead of holding people back from their happiness, even if they're doing something wrong, then that can be your guide. So you can go out and you can try to make a difference in the world, but do it with skillful means. So you don't increase the unhappiness and the suffering that's already so much. Yeah. Then you can be an agent of positive change.